Something I realize I want to spend more time sharing about is the art that I've made over the years. My perception of how I want to share the art that I've made or things that I've made with people has changed a lot over time. Just as I've let go of a lot, as life has taught me a lot of lessons, as I've been through a lot of stuff, as I've just let go and let go and let go and simplified my mind and my perspective, I think. What I notice, one thing among many things that has emerged, is that I want to genuinely share more about the art that I make and why I make it and what might be going through my mind while I'm making it. And I realize it's just been such a big part of my body. That's interesting. My life. I love that I said my body. For so long that it is a part of my body. It is a part of who I am. It's not something that, anyone I grew up with would have associated with me with, or probably would have expected. And I'm only saying that for the context of like, oh yeah, suddenly I've been doing something for over 25 years pretty deliberately, and I've accumulated a lot in that time. And that says a lot about the journey that I've been on and the journey that we're all on, and just the sort of the observations and the cultural commentary are something I would like to share more about. And the one I'm going to start with, because I was just looking at it, and I just heard Joe Rogan talking about this on his podcast with the guy that started Vice. I can't remember his name right now. I should remember it, but I do not. And they're talking about the border and all the fact that the guy from Vice, the guy that started Vice, no longer of Vice, but tends to do a deep dive on subjects and really does that like curious investigative journalism. And that's why Vice was so good in the beginning, and then it really fell apart when it became more corporatized and legalized and all of that. But he said, no matter who you talk to, it's really hard to get a clear answer about what's actually happening at the border. And it had just struck me that that's the case with so many things in our culture, whether on the micro or the macro, whether people are talking about narcissistic relationships that they have, which seem to just be ubiquitous now. It's like a contagion. It's a cultural, ideological, personological contagion that causes a massive amount of damage in the world. And it just seems like our perspective of reality and shared reality and truth and perception is just so unbelievably distorted at this point. It's difficult for anybody, even people that know each other really well, to have reasonable, rational, worthwhile conversations about any given subject. You name it: COVID, border issues, politics, abortion, gun rights, gun laws, you name it. It's almost impossible to have reasonable, rational conversations with people without people reacting, denying, getting frustrated, shutting you down, cutting you out of their life, ignoring you. And it just seems like the perspectives are all over the place. So as these two are talking about the border issues and the fact that it's really hard to come up with really clear information and data on this, I looked up this painting I did several years ago in the context of one of the border flare-ups. And I did not see this particular image. I was just thinking of this image. And it was of a little girl. And the little girl is being ripped away from her mother by someone in a uniform who is being fairly aggressive. And they are surrounded by people with their mouths wide open, presumably yelling, slandering, lashing out in some form of anger or frustration or protest or whatever. And it occurs to me when I look at that painting that if I post that painting, so many people will project, as they should, as art will instigate, people will project their own ideas and perspective into it. And I want to talk about my perspective in making it, and the intention within that. And many paintings I do have this sort of tinge to it, where the painting is about the world through the eyes of that little girl. I'm not trying to tell anyone that they need to take a certain side or that they need to have a certain perspective or else, because I believe like that's the beginning of authoritarianism. It's that it. It's like you need to think a certain way or else. You need to adhere to a certain reality that's convenient for me or else. That's true on the individual basis, in a family, in a business, in a nation. And so the painting is through the eyes of this little girl who, in my observation, is being ripped away from her goddess mother. To the child, the mother is a goddess. To the child, the mother is everything. To the child, the mother is safety, security, love, nurturing. The very meaning of existence is in that mother. And a child being ripped away from that mother by a man in uniform with an angry look on his face and an aggressive demeanor, and who is surrounded by yelling and chanting and raging voices and emotions, that child must be utterly terrified. That child is going to develop complex post-traumatic stress very, very quickly in the context of this kind of environment. It would be impossible for almost anyone to go through that kind of experience as a child, or even as an adult, but as a child, and not develop a tendency to live in fear, to live in stress, to live in anxiety, to have flashbacks of those, to not trust authority, to be terrified of separation, of abandonment, of injury. That little girl saw her mother as the goddess mother, and she was everything to her. And she saw the man in uniform as a terrifying creature that was tearing her away apart from the one source of love and security she has on this planet. And she is surrounded by voices with faces that are distorted and loud, and they're probably chanting from different perspectives, and they're probably opposing perspectives, and this child is just all caught up in it and is literally being held off the ground by the mother and the man in uniform. Her feet are not on the ground. She has no sense of security whatsoever. You can see the energy flowing from her mother to the child. You can see the energy coming out of people's mouths. And in a very subtle part of the painting, there is a sort of robot arm that is coming out of a hole in the ground that is meant to signify the technology that is used to manipulate all of it. The technology that is abused to manipulate all of it. Technology can be used for wonderful things. I hope making a recording like this is something useful, a useful way to use technology in a proactive way. And we all have the ability to use technology in a proactive way, and we can also use technology to do unbelievably horrible, terrible things. It's really in the intentions that we put behind how we use the tools that we have in the world, regardless of what those tools are. We're human beings. We make tools. How we use those tools, how we implement those tools, really comes from a place of intentions and values and ideas. And it's really up to us to be responsible in how we utilize the tools that we have. And when the technology is pulling this little girl down, it's grabbing at her pants, it's grabbing at her leg. So not only is she being held onto by her mother and grabbed by a man in uniform, but she's being tugged on from below by this mysterious technology that is pulling her downward. And it's kind of icky, and it's kind of sneaky, and it's kind of pokey and uncomfortable. So for me, when I share about a painting like that, I'm not necessarily trying to make anyone do anything, or I'm not trying to make anyone take a certain perspective. I'm portraying the world through the lens of that child. And in this particular painting, as in almost every painting, I'm not drawing ahead of time. I'm not preparing ahead of time. I'm not trying to sort of premeditate something. I am painting on a feeling or on an idea. I just start moving the brush. I start putting things in place. And what I've learned, and I believe musicians would say this too, is that the more you get out of your own way, the more you let your mind go, the more you relax, the more you open up, and the more you just allow that, the essence of that feeling or that thought or that meditation or that idea to just be felt, it just naturally comes out in the work. It's amazing. It comes out without even trying to make it happen. For this particular painting, I really did not. Oh my gosh. I had a hat on and Scarlett just freaked out when I came in the house from my shed. It's me. It's so funny how dogs do that. So the painting just emerges from a place of openness, of honesty, of allowing myself to empathize with my idea of this little girl. And it's unbelievable to me. It's always been a mystery to me. It's something I think I've probably obsessed over my entire life. It really does throw me for a loop how people cannot look at something like that and consider that child's point of view. It just seems so natural for us to do that. And yet we deny the children's point of view all the time in the name of ideas, in the name of beliefs, in the name of rationalization, in the name of denial, in the name of fear, in the name of learned helplessness. We just, there's another child suffering that we can't do anything about, so why should we try? Let's just look the other way and focus on our own life, and hopefully they don't get us one day. As long as they don't get us, as long as we're secure, everything's okay. We all go into our collective learned helplessness and our collective denial. And by doing so, we passively go into agreement with the policies and the behaviors and the horrible treatment of human beings. We go into agreement with it. We allow it. We empower it. If you or your children were being blatantly, horribly hurt or harmed, like the manner of this child that I described, usually it's way worse than that, and it was only because of some political idea, because of fear, because of the color of your skin, because you're on the wrong side of something, because someone's pointing the finger at you and calling you the other, that is the problem. If that was you or your child, you would hope and pray and beg that someone would care about you, that someone would stand up for you. Yet it's happening every day, all the time. That painting